Racing game fans will be the first to tell you that the genre is getting a bit stagnant. Open worlds have gotten bigger and graphics have gotten better, but truth told, I come away from most modern racers feeling that I've not seen anything new, so much so that I found myself extremely pessimistic every time a new teaser finds its way into the news. So when Funselektor, the creator of Absolute Drift, reached out and offered me a copy of his newest game, I was intrigued. Little did I know that this little indie game would end up as a contender for my favorite driving game of the year, and the reason is all in the name. I should explain why Art of Rally came as such a surprise to me. First, I did not get on all that well with Absolute Drift, Funselektor's previous game. I can't deny that it's one of the most original driving games of the 8th generation. Its art style is simple but pretty, and it's the only console game I'm aware of that places its focus entirely on drifting. But when I bought it a few years back, I expected a lightweight arcade game, and Absolute Drift is definitely not that. Art of Rally obviously offers a shift in focus, but again, not one I'm jonesing for. I've played my fair share of rally games, and while I can appreciate them, it's not my motorsport of choice. And honestly, I'm just not very good at rallying. But by far the biggest reason I was caught off guard by Art of Rally is precedent. The vast majority of indie racers from the past few years are arcade games that aim to capture the nostalgia of the way driving games used to be. That's not necessarily a bad thing. But as I alluded to in my Hotshot Racing review, this hardly motivates me to play for more than an hour at a time. Most of these games offer nothing their inspirations didn't besides the convenience of availability on new platforms. The whole point of games like Horizon Chase and Slipstream is that they're retro throwbacks, but once that nostalgia wears off, you're left with a shallow experience that doesn't do much new. In a genre that has stagnated as badly as this one, I'm itching for something fresh, not a retread of the past. Art of Rally sets itself apart by being unique in almost every facet. Funselektor has tried something that I've been wanting to see for a very long time, something that to my knowledge has only been attempted once. There is no shortage of games set in the past. Games based upon the Second World War are nauseatingly common, and medieval fantasy even more so. But as far as racing games go, there's only been one. Art of Rally is a celebration of the sport starting in the 1960s and carrying on through Group A. Working your way through the eras of rally in chronological order instills an appreciation for how engineering evolved. And it also provides a diegetic reason for a gradual hike in speed and difficulty. The game's 20th century setting does not feature as prominently as I'd like, but compared to Test Drive Ferrari, this is definitely the better take on the idea. Slightly Mad's implementation was little more than a gimmick, a way to pad out the runtime in a game that is otherwise puzzlingly light on content. Progression took an unreasonably long time in Test Drive Ferrari, while Art of Rally avoids that same pitfall by keeping things moving quickly. Starting in the late 60s and moving through the 1990s only takes a few hours, but in those hours you'll go through 51 unique stages across 5 locales. The primary career mode has plenty of replay value, and that's not even accounting for playing stages again with different eras of rally car or competing in online time attacks, or, my personal favorite inclusion, a free roam mode that lets you explore each of these 5 worlds completely unimpeded. Art of Rally's tracks are built from larger interconnected worlds, and the free roam mode completely opens them up, providing challenges that remind of a PS2-era Tony Hawk game, down to collecting the letters of the word rally scattered about the level. Its gameplay doesn't strive to capture nostalgia for an arcade classic, but it doesn't play like a modern rally sim either. Just as with Absolute Drift, Funselektor has crafted a driving model for Art of Rally that is completely unlike any game before it. The rally machines in this game have a tremendous amount of weight to them, and the challenge in the gameplay is to understand where and when that weight needs to be shifted, not only to finish the course quickly, but to finish it at all. AI difficulty is based on real players' times, meaning that the higher difficulties are challenging, but realistically so. I'm nervous to call Art of Rally a simulator, for fear that the racing game community will mount my head on a pike, but I truthfully don't know how else to describe this game. I don't know of any arcade racer that realistically simulates tire punctures and repair, but Art of Rally does, and between that and the handling model, I think calling it a simulator is more than fair. Like I said, I am not good at rallying. Practicing long enough to go from crashing out of every stage to setting somewhat respectable times was a rewarding experience, more so than any proper rally game I've played. That isn't a knock against Dirt, but Art of Rally's weighty driving and unique camera forced my brain to acknowledge that I'm not playing just any racing game. And what would feel like an inconvenient self-reprogramming in a traditional driving game instead feels like a whole new subgenre. I don't know that I'd be any better at proper rally sims after my time with Art of Rally, but at the very least, I feel driven to come back to the game for a relaxing yet engaging time. more so than any other indie racer I've played. It's not as if Funselektor threw everything you know about racing out of the window. He's just presented it in a fresh and unique way that, in my opinion, make it worth experiencing. I have only one significant complaint, one that I've seen echoed in the community: the lack of a co-driver feeding you instructions. In a game with a bird's eye camera, you obviously can't see where you're going beyond the edge of the screen, especially without a minimap. Funselektor released a statement about the calls for a chase cam and co-driver, where he said that, among other issues, paying for a voice-acted co-driver in every language the game supports would be prohibitively expensive for a one-man developer, which is true and fair. However, the next part of the statement isn't. Quote, "The rally stages have good length, but from playing the game enough, you will remember the stages and the high camera means that you can see what's coming in the stage and negates the need for pace notes." Unquote. In a game that has 10 or 15 stages, I'd agree. In a game that has 51, I simply can't. Personally, I have a very hard time memorizing tracks and game worlds. I don't think there's a single racetrack that I could draw a map of from memory, and I play 100% length races in F1 every week. You don't need a voice actor to flash turn and jump indicators on the screen. Not an insignificant complaint, but not one that undermines how good of an experience Art of Rally otherwise is. I'm glad that I took to this game the way I did, because when I revisited Absolute Drift for this video, it finally clicked. After a handful of attempts over the last couple of years, the way I was meant to play Absolute Drift made sense, and I've been enjoying it almost as much as its follow-up. By changing up the camera angles, rejecting game design norms, and trimming the fat, these two games have managed to make the genre feel fresh in ways that I was honestly beginning to doubt was possible. I would love to see a game in this vein set in previous eras of Formula 1 or touring car racing, but only if Funselektor can find a way to make those two disciplines feel as unique and distinguished from other adaptations as Art of Rally does. Because while players are initially drawn to these two games by their art, the gameplay is ultimately just as important when it comes to keeping them engaged. It's why I see myself continuing to play this game in the future, while Hot Shot Racing has sat untouched since I finished my review. In terms of pure hours played, I seriously doubt Art of Rally will ever overtake F1 2020, my other favorite driving game of the year. But where that game will be obsoleted by the next annual installment, Art of Rally is the game that cannot be wholly replaced by its successor or the games that inspired it. And that is how Funselektor sets himself apart from the rest. Going forward, I'll be doing QAs at the end of videos instead of patron readouts. This will allow me to interact with y'all more, and patron questions will get priority to make up for the readout going away. You can ask me your questions in the comments, on Twitter, on Discord, or on Patreon. So, without further ado, are you prepared for me to ask the dumbest shit? I think it's funnier if I'm not. Do you always talk this fast, or only on YouTube? Always. It's a problem. If you stack two lasagna on top of each other, is it now just a larger lasagna? I'm a bit more worried about how you think lasagna is the plural form of lasagna, or that it's even possible to have one lasagna and not some lasagna. Is this some weird Australian thing? What's your opinion regarding the matter of the Swedish election during 2018? Sweden has a government? Nah, this seems like a genuine question, so I'll give you a genuine answer. I don't know. I'm not much for politics, even within my own country, and I have basically no idea what goes on across the pond. From a brief Google, it seems like politicians doing what politicians do best, disagreeing so vehemently that they do nothing instead of making a decision. And given the state of my own country, I think I prefer that to what we actually have. Is Kacey stealing our funny? Racevic and I are splitting it two ways. Does milk float? Only the crunchy kind. When did you start making videos on YouTube and what motivated you in doing it? Sometime in 2010, I uploaded my first videos to YouTube. They were terrible quality, had my 11-year-old voice, and didn't offer much excitement. As for this channel, I started it in 2017 to upload random original Xbox footage, but as I got back into old video games after a couple of years of just playing Counter-Strike, channels like Greenham Gaming and LGR inspired me to make my own unique content. Greenham Gaming was definitely the biggest influence on my early work, and while I definitely didn't do Tim's content justice and probably still don't, I credit his videos for showing me the power of emotional writing and good production value. Those two channels, along with Ahoy, Racevic, and Mini-Me, are what I consider to be my 5 biggest influences, and I'm lucky to have made friends and gotten advice from a couple of them along the way.